everybody. Good to see everybody again. Or at least you can see me, and I'm hoping I can see you. And we are again here at Moundville for the 32nd Annual Native American Festival, virtual festival. We've been here since Monday, and we've had quite a few great guests and programs all week. And I want to share a little bit about some of the things that we had in the past. We were talking about different things. We had an astronaut on yesterday, and we had music this morning with some music with some groups this morning. We had some dancers. We had, you name it, we had all kinds of different people. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about archaeology, and I'm also going to say I want to share one thing with you before I get started. We do have to let everybody know about our sponsors. Moundville Telephone Company, Bank of Moundville, EBSCO, and Alabama Bicentennial Commission for their contribution to the festival. You're greatly appreciated. I have to do that. And right now we have some guests that on with us today, and I'm going to introduce Mr. Brandon Thompson, director of the Gorgas House Museum at the University of Alabama Museum. Matt Gage, down in the corner here, director of the Office of Archaeological Research at the University Museum. Stacye Hathorn, state archaeologist, Alabama Historical Commission, and later on we'll have adding on to this LaDonna Brown, director of research, cultural interpretation, heritage preservation, Department of Culture, Humanities of the Chickasaw Nation. At this moment, I'm going to let you guys take it and have fun.
All right. Thanks, great. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate that. All right, guys. So at any point, anybody who's watching and then kind of tuning in, you're welcome to send us questions or comments, and we'll kind of go back and forth and see what everybody has to say. I'll be giving a list of questions that people online have submitted to us, and we can start approaching those, and we can go from there. We can just kind of see where the conversation takes us. I'll just start with one of our first questions is from Carnus, age 7 in Tuscaloosa. Wants to know how you became an archaeologist. And Stacye, because you're the first on my screen, I'm going to turn that question to you. So you get to start us off today.
Well, I always wanted to be one. As long as my mother kept up with what I wanted to be in my little, memory book, I wanted to be an archaeologist. And my parents encouraged that. They took me on vacations. We would go to national parks and historic sites like Williamsburg, like Moundville, like Mesa Verde out west. And they bought me books and fed that interest. So, when it came time to go to school, I went to college and university, and I studied to become an archaeologist, which takes a master's degree at least. So.
Right on. Matt, what about you?
Well, I always get involved with things that involve digging in the dirt. And at first I wanted to be a paleontologist. I thought that was exactly what I was going to do. I was going to do everything I could to learn all about dinosaurs. And by the time I turned about 9 years old, I decided that wasn't for me. I was going to be a truck driver instead.
I can see that, actually. All right.
And luckily, by the time I got to be about 16 or 17, I really became more interested in history and archaeology. And when it came time to choose a major, I didn't hesitate. I jumped right into anthropology and have never left and have loved it the whole time. So it has been a lot of fun. Growing up, my family was just like Stacye. They were always taking us to national parks and museums and giving us an opportunity to learn about history. So it was a great upbringing. What about you, Brandon?
That's a great question. My trajectory into archaeology was a lot like yours. When I was little, I loved paleontology. I had dinosaur wallpaper and dinosaur toys that my mom kept a bunch of boxes of. So now they're my kids' toys. So it's pretty interesting seeing, dinosaur toys from 1985 back in my living room again. So that's pretty fun. But, as a child, growing up in South Georgia, we would take field trips to Kolomoki. And then that's kind of where that interest was spurned, and finding projectile points in the woods behind your house and that kind of thing. My dad hit one with a lawnmower once, and I think it's the first time I actually saw a projectile point in person. So that interest was always there in archaeology and anthropology. And then that kind of shifted towards more of that focus as I became a teenager. I never had an interest in being a truck driver. I enjoyed watching it on the History Channel. That was always something fun to watch, but never something I generally thought I would pursue. But yeah, when I went into college, focused in anthropology with a minor in biology, and went that way. And I loved it. I worked with you for 10 years. And it's still something I hold very fond to my heart, and I would encourage anyone to do it. So the other thing I'm going to point out for anybody watching, Matt is in a truck. He is out in the field doing applied anthropology. He's doing archaeology right now. So Matt, are you on a survey right now? Is that what you're working on?
No, we're actually working on a historic site up here in North Alabama, and it's a site that is very interesting, but at the moment it's considered to be confidential, so I can't really talk about it. And that's
one of the cooler things about archaeology. Yeah, a lot of times you can't talk about what you're working on yet. Yep. So that's actually a really good transition into the next question from Samantha, 10 years old in Birmingham. She wanted to ask, what are your favorite things about archaeology?
All right.
Stacye, you want to take that one? Or?
Matt sounded like he was ready to go.
All right, go for it, Matt.
All right. Well, to me, archaeology is not just the individual items that you find. It is, and I guess you guys will both agree with me on this, it's mildly addicting to be involved in an excavation and to find things. It's fantastic. But that is such a minor part of archaeology. So much of it has to do with the stories that you learn about the archaeological site or the individuals that made that site. And that's really where the love of archaeology builds and grows, is learning so much about these individuals, whether it's Native American populations or whether it's historic populations. Archaeology is all about the stories for me.
Absolutely.
I would expand on what Matt said. I mean, the stories are the thing about archaeology, the information that we uncover. But archaeology, to me, not everybody gets to write their history in the history book, but everybody writes their story in the soil. So archaeology is a way of telling stories of people that we might not always hear their story. So that's one of the things I really love about it. Another thing I love about it is that, when you're an archaeologist, you're an active participant in that. So you're actively going out and finding these stories and interpreting these stories rather than just reading something somebody else wrote.
Yeah, great points. And I'm going to piggyback off what you both said. And probably the most compelling thing about it to me is the human element of it. Is like, we are here because we are interested in people and we want to find out more about people. And whenever you find an object or a site, no matter where it happens to be, deep in the forest or in the center of an urban center that nobody's seen for 200 years or 6,000 years, it's the knowledge that has some type of human knowledge put onto it, that it actually functioned for a person someplace. And that teaches us something about them, something how we understand ourselves in relation to that. And it is really that human element of archaeology that I find so compelling and interesting.
Absolutely.
All right. So moving on to our next question from Kayla, age 5, from Tuscaloosa. Have you ever found a dinosaur? Stacye?
Well, that gets back to what we were talking about at the beginning. It's paleontology versus archaeology.
All right. So Matt, what's the difference there?
All right. So paleontology involves more the study of creatures that are non-human in prehistory, going back millions of years. Archaeology is the study of the material culture of people, what they've left behind. And there's a difference there, because you're looking at not just the remains of the creatures, you're looking at the actual materials that they made. And that's one of the unique things about human beings, is we make so many things over the course of our lives, whether it's something as simple as a fire there's evidence that remains behind after that, or whether it's something like a projectile point. We all leave behind evidence of who we are and what we've done. And that's a little bit different in paleontology. So there's a big difference. Personally, I have never found a dinosaur. I have found plenty of plant remains, fossilized plant remains. How about you guys? Ever found a dinosaur?
Never.
Brandon, you must have with the expedition.
The expeditions I've been on, yes, you know, we go down to Herald Station and that's what you're looking for. Not dinosaurs per se, but, you know, marine animals, crinoids and that kind of thing. I think I've found one prehistoric fossil. I think it was probably a crinoid shell or something like that on an archaeological site once. That may have been repurposed for jewelry or something to that effect, but never intentionally have I found a dinosaur fossil on an archaeological site. It's always been doing, when you're going to do paleontology, you're going to look for that specific thing, and that's where you go to look, because you're looking at completely different soil horizons at this point in depths and exposures. So never intentionally, unless that's what I was actually looking for.
Well,
Hey,
you, Brandon.
hang on, Stacey, one second.
What, Matt?
Go ahead. I'll catch up after you're done.
Like Brandon, I've been with the expedition to Herald Station actually looking for fossils, and I have found bits of mosasaurs and of course lots of shark teeth and fish teeth and those kinds of fossils. But I was with paleontologists, and that was the purpose of the outreach was for the paleontology. But we did find when I was working in Wilcox County, we found on a middle woodland period site, we found a fossilized manatee vertebrae that had been used as a hammerstone.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
That's pretty neat.
That is really cool.
Yeah. So Matt,
this is a good time to kind of explain what the museum expedition is, Brandon.
Yep.
Sure, I'll take that. Yeah, so the museum expedition is a program that's been going on for almost 40 years now. It's in the 30s, if not 40. I can't remember the exact date of it, but Museum Expedition is essentially a program put on through the Alabama Museum of Natural History, where they, for a somewhere along about 3 to 4 week program, where you're allowed to camp, you have a campsite, and then you also travel and you do archaeology, paleontology. So you get hands-on experience with an expert in the field assisting them in their research. So you have the campsite, you live in a tent, and they prepare pretty good food, actually. Allie's a great field cook. And then you spend the rest of the day actually doing the excavation or the survey work looking for paleontological remains. And it's a fun program. I've done it 3 or 4 times at this point. Briarfield, Tannehill, Gulf State Park, a couple of different places. Doing archaeology. The paleontological excavations are always fun and fascinating to see what they find. And if you want more information about that, you can check that out on the Alabama Museum of Natural History's website. They have a lot of information there. And if you stay tuned for next summers, I think they might actually try and get back in the field. This year, I think it was a virtual expedition. But check that out. They have great pictures and photographs on it. And it's a wonderful program. I know, Stacey, you've done it. I think, Matt, have you ever participated in one?
I have never been involved directly with one, only pushing you to be involved in it.
Yeah, good times. That was a fun excavation, doing a shell min excavation down in Gulf State Park. The campsite was really hot, and I think I remember telling you we were in like this little pine grove of trees, so there was no air movement whatsoever. So I had to sleep with like a fan like right on my chest, pointed at my face just so I could fall asleep at night. And that's just part of the adventure of expedition. So you really learn that all you really need is to be dry and cool and well fed, and then all your other needs are taken care of. Everything else is totally fine. So it's a lot of fun.
It's a fantastic program. I encourage anybody to participate that has the opportunity.
Oh, fantastic! We have LaDonna on.
Hey, LaDonna.
Hey.
How are you doing?
LaDonna.
I'm good. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Once again, so LaDonna is joining us. LaDonna Brown is the Director of Research and Cultural Interpretation and Heritage Preservation for the Department of Culture and Humanities of the Chickasaw Nation. LaDonna, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We've just been, talking shop and answering some of the questions that people have submitted. So we're really excited to have you on.
it's really good to be here today with you guys, and I'm really excited to talk a little bit about how the Chickasaw Nation includes culture within the archaeological, uh, you know, um, interpretation of the different sites. And Moundville is spectacular in the fact that we can definitely um, make those cultural connections to Moundville. And so it's just an amazing place. Every time I hear about uh, discoveries at Moundville, and it's not even anything really big, it's like the really small things, but I can make that cultural connection, and that's just an amazing type of information for me to know. I know it doesn't mount to a whole hill of beans in the whole world of archaeology, but it's really amazing, and it's really amazing to meet the people that work there, that work on it there on an everyday basis, because that would just be like a dream come true for me, just to be there on an everyday basis and just to, experience and enjoy the environment through all the 4 seasons and just answering questions from the general audience. It's just an amazing place.
Well, thanks, LaDonna. One of our next questions was going to be, what is the most exciting thing you've ever found? We have a list of questions that children have submitted to us. And it's always really interesting to see the National Geographic and History Channel that they focus on these really beautiful specimens, these beautiful artifacts. And, those are always fun to talk about. But exactly like you mentioned, we are interested in the human element, the cultural element, whatever it is we might happen to be finding. So, a couple of sherds are just as interesting, if not more so, than a complete vessel, because we can still learn about the people that we want to study and learn from.
Right, exactly.
So what I'm going to do, go ahead, Matt.
There's actually a sort of a riddle that most archaeology professors will pass on to their students, and that's I think it was Dr. Krauss that told it to us. If
Yeah.
you are working on an archaeological site and there are some looters coming up to loot the archaeological site, if they catch you with these whole vessels, they're going to kill you. And, what do you do? And, some people said you run, you leave the artifacts behind. And the whole gist of the story is you just break the vessels. They mean as much to the archaeologist in terms of being able to interpret what you're looking at, broken as they do intact. So like you said, Brandon, if you find a couple of sherds, sometimes that can mean more than finding an entire artifact.
Yeah, and I tell that same anecdote, that same riddle a couple of times a year whenever things turn to archaeology up at the museum. And it's fun seeing people's faces like, oh yeah, and they have that aha moment. They actually see, the information is the more important thing, not the object itself, even though they still have value to us. So,
when I'm asked that question, I know people are talking about an object and they want to say, I found this arrow point or something. But I think the thing that sticks out in my mind is when I was in college and we were working on the creek town of Fishhatchee site, and it was ahead of a gravel quarry. So we were trying to get all of the stories out of there that we could quickly. I watched over time, every little stain in the soil means something. So like, if you dig a hole and then you just mix all the dirt up and put the dirt back in the hole, it's going to be a different color when you dig it because you've mixed all of the organic top layer in with the bottom. But, especially if you put a post in the ground for a house and then that post rots, then you get different colors too. And that's what we call features in archaeology. And so over time, this excavation at Fishhatchee went on for, I think, 11 years. And over time, every one of those little features was mapped out on this huge map that we had on Dr. Sheldon's wall in his lab. And we began to see this entire town, just by recording these stains in the soil that most people, probably don't even associate with archaeology. And to me, that was just, I know that's not an artifact, but like it just made the town and the people come alive for me to watch that evolution.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, it all ties into the idea that it's the stories that these things tell us,
Exactly.
what we learn about people. And that's one of the great things about having LaDonna involved is, she has the oral histories and traditions that help us to understand what we're seeing.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
all a necessary component.
Yeah, LaDonna, one of the questions we have for you kind of ties into this, and I'll go ahead and I'll ask it to you now. So, does the archaeological work today inform the understanding of the past? And if so, how does it do that? How does it do that for your people?
Yes, definitely. The archaeological work of today is very fascinating. Um, every time we hear about a new artifact or feature, we want to know all that we can from this information or from what we see. Um, Archaeological work helps to inform our understanding of the past. Much tribal knowledge has been lost through the centuries from when we lived in the Southeast to where we live now in Oklahoma. As tribal people living in an ecosystem that does not reflect the Southeast, we have to remember what the environment in our homeland was like. Even little things like animals, in our homeland in the Southeast, of course, there's such things as alligators, that sort of thing. And once we got removed to Oklahoma, um, those types of animals did not exist there, and so we had to make those changes. And so that's one thing that we have to remember in the archaeological record, making that change from Oklahoma as tribal people, making that change from Oklahoma environment to the southeastern environment. And when we get to the southeastern environment and we begin to see those artifacts and those things being made there by our ancestors, it just gives it a brand new spin, a brand new understanding to us. And so it's almost like it's all brand new again. So that alone takes us one step farther away from our ancestors in the Southeast. In addition, that there had been traumatic experiences that we had to work through. And so from this, two concepts are realized. The first concept is that when we work through this traumatic experience, we have to think only about survival and not other events of our lives. So a lot of cultural knowledge, a lot of traditional knowledge was lost. And then many tribal members were lost. And so they took all of that knowledge with them to the grave. And because of experiences such as that, um, a lot of our knowledge that was handed down through oral traditions was lost. And so when we travel back to places like Moundville and we're able to look at the artifacts and look at the cultural features, once again, we begin to be reminded as tribal people of the amazing, complex political system that was in place and the type of spirituality that's reinforced from these places that we see. It also reinforces the understanding of the kinship that existed from this early time period. And so, as I study these topics in depth from a cultural perspective, it begins to provide fine-tuned details from what fine-tuned details that are missing from what is already known. And this is the exciting and amazing part, because then we as tribal people, then we can begin to fill in the blanks also. And so when we look at the archaeological understanding and interpretation, and then we begin to add our own cultural information, it makes for a very good, very well-rounded perspective of the types of things that you see that are excavated and that are being found regarding the study in archaeology, whether it's through excavations or even through the reports that are written. And it's all brand new and it's all fascinating, but we're also able to make that cultural connection. And when we make that cultural connection, I think it makes it even stronger for the field of archaeology, because then it's giving that reinforcement to a group of people who understand the culture. So it's an amazing time, I think, with archaeology.
Yeah, it really seems like it promotes a holistic understanding of what we're looking at here. And you have the archaeology, the culture history, the oral history. So you can really put all that together and really coalesce into this holistic understanding of what we're looking at. So that's really powerful. Kind of going on along the same, excuse me, along that same vein. So what advice would you give to archaeologists today who study your ancestors?
I have several pieces of advice for archaeologists who study our ancestors. Um, as a tribal person, I am grateful that our ancestors are being studied. However, most archaeologists discuss these groups as people who no longer exist. As a member of a federally recognized tribes who consider ourselves as descendants of this early community, it is difficult to overcome this hurdle. From this perspective of archaeologists, our oral history sometimes seems like it's not taken seriously. And we, as tribal people, we don't have the opportunity to tell our history in classrooms. However, I have worked on several curriculums where they are introducing archaeology in the classroom. And so, which is a good thing, because the younger that you can talk to students about the importance of archaeology and the importance of not removing everything that you see on the ground, that's helpful. However, our perspective to these students is not taught. And so um, the information the students receive is that the people who created items from this early time, and this is prehistory according to archaeologists, that those people no longer exist and everything about them exists in the past. However, as tribal people who can point to many artifacts, features, and cultural knowledge taken from these sites, we can definitely point out our own cultural identity. It is the cultural identity that connects me with places like Moundville. You can imagine my shock when I visited Moundville for the very first time and the picture of a horned serpent was on the wall. It was like someone eavesdropped on the story that my grandpa told me, and it felt like an invasion of privacy. At the same time, I was provided reinforcement through my ancestors and in the items that were excavated in who I am, where I came from, and what group I belong to. This is the reinforcement that is provided to Southeastern Indian tribal groups from archaeological information. We are still here and flourishing, our culture is relevant, and archaeologists need our help to provide a more inclusive story. And, that's all we ask for, is that we have the opportunity to tell our story and to show how our story actually supports and reinforces what is found in the archaeological record.
That's fantastic. What I'm curious to hear now is, both from Matt and Stacye and LaDonna as well, is can y'all tell us about some of these interactions and relationships, how you're actually kind of merging your different fields together? So Matt in archaeology, Stacye down in Montgomery, tell us about some of the experiences y'all had actually working with LaDonna and some of the other tribal groups and tribal nations.
Well, I mean, the obvious answer to that is that the laws, the preservation laws, have been changed, and they include consultation with tribes. So when there is a project that has a federal involvement, there's a law that basically says your heritage, your tax money shouldn't go to destroy your heritage. I'm paraphrasing or simplifying it, but when I first came to work here 20 years ago, that just involved consultation between the federal agencies that was doing the activity that might affect a historic site, and in my office, the Alabama Historical Commission. But the laws quickly changed after that, and now any tribe who, for whom that was their traditional homeland, now is able to consult. So that's fantastic, because now you have, it's fantastic because it makes the larger picture, like LaDonna was talking about, it completes the picture. But I personally found that a fantastic thing, because my job is preservation, and I consider the tribes some of my greatest allies in terms of preservation. And as LaDonna knows, we've worked together on a lot of things that had no federal undertaking. When there's a site that's threatened here, Chickasaw Nation and many other tribes have been fantastic advocates that supported the preservation side of things, which is the responsibility of my agency in the state. So, we've forged relationships, we've become personal friends, we've stood back to back in many battles to save historic sites.
Absolutely. So from an archaeological standpoint, when some of the most powerful experiences I've had working with Native peoples is the opportunity to see some of the things that were translated into their new lives in Oklahoma. So I've had an opportunity to go to the ceremonial grounds of one of the Muskogee Nation, Miko, and just to be able to see the layout of the ceremonial grounds and listen to the stories of how things are done there and what's important and what's what the individual features are, and then being able to consider an archaeological site in terms of those stories and what you see there. And so much of it is explained, things that you would never have an understanding of unless you had involvement with the people that came from Alabama, the people that were making these archaeological sites, that were using these individual artifacts and can actually explain what they are and what they mean. And that's been fantastic for me. And I really appreciated the opportunities that I've had to work with Native folks on a lot of archaeological sites.
Yeah, it really humanizes the thing that you're looking at, actually getting the perspectives, the points of view from these people. And once again, it provides that human element that we're so interested in learning about. LaDonna, are there any memorable experiences that come to mind when we're talking about these things?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We have worked with several federal agencies throughout the state of Alabama and throughout the Southeast. And gosh, there's so many people that, after they have studied, the archaeological record, and after they have, for example, picked up a piece of daub, the clay that's found on the walls of the houses of the very, very ancient houses, and they pick those up and they put their fingers. Maybe there's finger marks in the daub, and they put their fingers in the daub, and they're like, just imagine, and they're holding that and just saying, just imagine, who was the last person that touched this, that put this on the wall and left their fingerprints in there. And you may put your fingerprints in there or your fingers in there, and it may fit perfectly, and you're thinking, what were they thinking along those lines? And when you can share that experience with an archaeologist, as a tribal member with an archaeologist, and your ideas, that are thinking about this are the same, and you're both kind of following along that same trail of who was the person, what were they thinking, what were they doing, was it a woman and she was taking care of her child, but you're making that conversation with somebody, with an archaeologist that has come up there, maybe never even knew about Native populations until they started their job, and you're making those connections. That's when you understand that it is a universal connection. Everybody's the same. Everybody has to have a house. Everybody has to build a house. Everybody has to have clothes. Everybody has to eat. There's particular types of foods people eat. And so when you begin making those connections with different archaeologists along the way, it really begins to create that relationship between you and that archaeologist on a personal level, because then you know that you understand life in the same way that the archaeologist understands life. We both may do things a little bit differently, but we understand it in the same way. And so um, like I said, oh my gosh, there's many different experiences that I have. And it's those kinds of experiences that I have had with the archaeologist. Of course, my background is in archaeology too, coming out of Mississippi. But it is that those connections and those relationships that you build, because we're all human and we all understand this thing called life. We all understand it, in the same way. There may be things that we do differently from each other, but, we're all similar in the way that we do things. And so just creating relationships with the people in Alabama, with each of you, even, that that's what brings this to life, and that's what brings it more amazing, and just for me, makes it even a better and a more wonderful type of field to work with, when you have people like that who understand, who truly understand, life, and how our ancestors lived life, and how you guys connect to how our ancestors lived lives. And so it's an amazing relationship, and I don't know why, but I'm always amazed at creating those wonderful relationships with people outside of tribal people.
Well, thank you. We appreciate those efforts. Um,
Mount, Moundville's a fantastic place to do that. It's, people, when they go to Moundville, a lot of times what they see is a nice park.
Mm.
But when you start to explain what Moundville is, it is the remnants of a massive city that was built prior to European intervention, prior to the wiping out of 75 to 90% of the native population. And, it had traders coming in from all over what's now the United States. It had people coming from the Rocky Mountains, the Great Lakes, the East Coast, the Gulf Coast. It's just amazing to think of that site. And when you explain to them a little bit more about it, and really what they're looking at, you can just see them light up and come to recognize that, it's so much more than a park. It is really a spiritual place.
Yeah, I've actually spoken with people who've come into the park for the first time, and as they come over the bump where the railroad tracks are, they get tears in their eyes, because they're just in awe of this massive village and mound site that they weren't prepared for. It is a really powerful place. It's a powerful experience. LaDonna, we have a viewer comment and question for you.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and take a look at that. This is from Dr. Bill Bomar. LaDonna, I've heard you mention that some of the creatures that appear on prehistoric artifacts from the Southeast are important in the oral tradition of your people. Can you give us an example? Thank you, Bill.
Yes, definitely. Yes, thank you, Bill, for that question. It's a really good question, and I'm really happy to answer that question. Definitely, the horned snake emblem that is found throughout Moundville is one of the symbols that really spoke to me, because it was told to me as a child, and my grandfather had told me the story. We were sitting on he was out doing yard work at our house one day, and it was a really muggy day in April, and it was one of those cloudy days, and then the clouds would go away, and then it'd be sunny, and then the clouds would go away, and then it'd rain a little bit, and then the clouds would go away, and then it'd be sunny and then it'd rain. So it was one of those weird days. And I mean, just hot and just almost unbearable. So he's out there doing this yard work, and he comes and sits down. And every time he came and sat down to rest, I'd run over and sit with him. And if he drank water, I would drink water. If he ate an apple, I ate an apple. Just, sitting there with him and just, enjoying my grandfather being at my house. And he said, looks like the horned snake is out today. And immediately I was like, what are you talking about? What is this horned snake? And then he started telling me that the horned snake is a snake that has all the characteristics of all the animals. It has horns, fins, wings, feathers, fur, scales, spots, stripes, everything that other animals have. That's what characteristics that the horned snake has. And I was like, well, where is it? Where can we go see it? And he was like, you can't go hunting for that kind of snake. That it's not a good snake to go find. And he said that the snake lives in a water source, but this water source is found like on a hill or a mountain, and it has a series of underground caves underneath that water source. And so if somebody was to go jump into that water source and go trying to go down, they would quickly get sucked down into the bottom portions of that cave network. And that's what the snake wants it to do, wants people to come down there. Once he gets down there, then I think that a snake actually ate people. But he said sometimes, because the snake is a spiritual snake, sometimes people would learn these chants that are called snake chants, and they would sing to the snake, and the snake would come up, and they would be able to, if they didn't get too scared, then they would be able to request of the snake to learn these evil ways that the snake knew. And these were spiritual ways. They're bad things to teach people. When we talk about the people who learn these things, we call them witches. And so they would cause bad things to people. We believe that this horned snake lives today. We have had reports from several tribal people from all of the 5 tribes who have said that they have seen the snake, or they have seen evidence of the snake. One of our tribal members reported seeing the snake back in the late 1950s. And they said that they were out for an early morning hunt, and they was on their way home, and the sun was coming up. And as they walked over a hill, and it was coming down the other side, when they didn't really look on the next hill coming up, but when they were fixing to come up the other hill, they looked up, and there was a tree up on that hill at the top, and this tree was dead. It was just like a stump that was standing there. And when they looked up at that stump at the pool, this snake had draped itself on the top of the stump or the tree, and the rest of it was hanging down off the side on down to the ground. And so the person doesn't even know how long it was, but all they could see was the snake's head and the horns. And they said, when they saw that, it scared them to death. And they said they couldn't even take their eyes off of it, that they walked backwards, and they walked backwards all the way up that hill that they had just came down. When they got to the top of the hill and was still walking backwards, as soon as they didn't see the snake, they turned around and ran home. Never went to that part of the woods ever again. So it's a supernatural being. We believe it to be a supernatural being, but it chooses to show itself to certain people. And so that was a Chickasaw person. We have had reports from Choctaw people, from Creek people, from Seminole people, that that they have seen the snake or evidence of the snake in several areas in Mississippi and in Oklahoma. And so, I've never seen it, but my grandfather's seen it. I've had, people that I know, that I love and trust, that I know that wouldn't lie to me about things like this, that they have told me about this, and that they have seen it, and that other people have seen it. So even though I haven't seen it, I do believe that it is a supernatural being that does exist, and that does exist, in this world. And I don't hope to see it anytime soon or at any time.
Don't blame you.
Yeah, right there with you. That sounds pretty scary.
So does everybody have the same consensus that it is sort of an evil thing? All the tribes?
Yes. All the 5 tribes from the Southeast. And then when I talk about the 5 tribes from the Southeast, I talk about Chickasaw, Choctaw, Cherokee, Seminole, and Creek. We all have the same understanding, cultural understanding of the snake, and we all have that belief about it is an evil being, and that it teaches people evil medicine. And when we say evil medicine, it's a spiritual thing. It's a spiritual force, and that like I said, we call those people witches. They learn how to put spells and things upon other people. They're just evil people that do bad things. I mean, they can scare them. They make them sick, make them have diseases and things like that. So, and all 5 tribes have the same belief about the horned snake.
LaDonna, what's it called in Chickasaw?
Excuse me?
What's its name in Chickasaw?
Oh, in Chickasaw, we refer to the horned snake as the Sinti Ishtaholo.
Thank you.
Greyhawk would like to come on and make a comment about the snake, the serpent as well. So Greyhawk, are you able to come up and make a comment?
Yeah, I could do that. I could do that. Good seeing you, LaDonna. And I just, as you were telling a story, I remember my grandfather and some of my aunts and uncles telling me a story about the flying serpent. And what it was very similar. Like I said, I'm part of Muskogean Nation. I'm Choctaw and Homa. And it's very similar. Whereas when I was told the serpent only shows itself when the humans are not doing things correctly, because the serpent has characteristics of all the animals. And when the humans on the earth, or our people, are not living the way they should live, then it shows itself and says, either you straighten out or I will take care of you. So whenever it does show up, that means that something's not right, and we need to start thinking about straightening things out. So that was our interpretation of it. It's a messenger. It is a spirit. It is something that's supernatural, but it not necessarily evil. It can be, but it does warn you before it reacts. So it basically is like a warning sign when it does show up that look, you need to straighten out. And we represent all the animals, and that's the way we look at it. And I just want to share that because I was listening to her story, and it was very similar to the way I grew up listening to that story too.
That's great.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fascinating to hear like even subtle cultural differences between different groups who have this shared cultural item or deity, whatever you want to call it, but there are slight differences, but there's still this core thing that kind of unites everyone together and ties everybody together. That's fascinating and interesting to hear about. So thank you, Greyhawk. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
You bet. So LaDonna, I asked Matt and Stacye this earlier, but how did you get into your profession? How did you get into archaeology? How did you get where you currently are?
It's a really long story.
Okay.
But basically, I was working. I had finished part of a degree in biology with a minor in chemistry because I wanted to go into medical research. But I had taken a year off and got got employed with the Chickasaw Nation in the Cultural Resources Office as a museum assistant. And it was right after NAGPRA was passed. And we received the first boxes and binders of artifacts held in museums. And we didn't have a place to store all the artifacts. So that was our first huge concern with all of these artifacts coming in and all of these binders coming in. And so we're just like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And these binders and books quickly began to, these binders and everything started quickly being piled onto a regular sized desk. And so we had to move all of those binders and the mail for just NAGPRA stuff into another room on a regular sized conference table. And so that started filling up really fast. And so then we started getting calls from archaeologists. And it just seemed like, as archaeologists talk to our cultural people, that everybody's speaking English, but nobody is understanding what the other person is saying. And I was like, gosh, there needs to be a mediator. There needs to be somebody, who can understand from the archaeological perspective what the archaeologists are meaning. But there also needs to be somebody who's, cultural, who can kind of take the cultural information and create it or to fix it to where the archaeologists understand what the cultural people are saying. Because it just seems like, people were talking around each other or over each other, but not really to each other. So I was like, well, hope that happens. Hope somebody comes along that can do that. So it just happened that I went to go visit a friend in Missouri, and she said, "Oh, let's go over to Wycliffe Mound site. I'll show you the mounds." And I was like, "Okay, great. We'll go see the mounds." I had no clue what a mound was. There I was. I finished. This was back in the 90s, and I had no clue what a mound was. Never saw one. Didn't know what they were about, anything. And so I went to go visit Wycliffe Mounds, and the lady there, her name is Carly Hildebrandt. She's the manager there. And my friend brings me into the office area and says, "This is LaDonna, and she's Chickasaw from the Chickasaw Nation." And Carla immediately, the light bulb turns on, and she's like, "You know what?" She goes, "I'm going to give you the keys to our different buildings out there." She goes, "I want you to go out there and look around by yourself and just kind of give me an idea of how you feel about the mound site and what you think about the mound site." So I was like, "Okay, sure," not knowing, what's in these buildings or what the mound site's about. But I go into the first one. It's called the Lifeways building, and the Lifeways building has all of this information about Mississippian daily life. And I begin to walk around, and just things just start coming to me. When my mom told me stories about the possum and the raccoon, and they have possum jars and raccoon jars and duck jars and turtle jars. And I'm just like, whoa, wait a minute, whoa, something's going on here. And what's happening is that these are really making cultural connections for me. And as I begin to look at the basketry and the pottery, and knowing that those are things that our ancestors did, things really began to click for me. And as they began to click for me, then I realized I have to get involved with this archaeology information and understand how those artifacts connect to me, because they're connecting to me in a very personal way. And because they're connecting to me in a very personal way, I have to know about this more. And so I go back and I'm like, this is just too amazing. And I'm just overwhelmed with all of the information that has been shared with me just walking around in these buildings. And so before I left, she offered me an internship. Sorry. She offered me an internship for the summertime. And I think it was like in February when I went to visit. And so the internship usually goes to students from the local university. They're not just given to, people that walk in off the street. But I realized at that moment, I had to say yes. If I didn't say yes, then all of this archaeology and information will be lost to me, and the person that needed to be the mediator might be me. And so I told her, I was like, yeah, I'll take it. Yeah. And so in May of that same year, quit my job at the Chickasaw Nation and moved to Kentucky and began my internship at Wycliffe Mounds. In the fall, I started my anthropology degree at Southeast Missouri State College, and finished it in the spring of that semester of that year. And then the next year, I enrolled. Well, that same spring, I enrolled at University of Mississippi, and went to school. Moved to Kentucky. Moved to Oxford, Mississippi, in the fall of that year, and began my master's degree there at Ole Miss. And so that was kind of the start of this long career. But just knowing that when those first boxes came in, and I really wasn't interested in archaeology. I mean, my mind wasn't even there. I was still thinking about medical research and doing those types of things. But it's still very much research. It's still really very analytical. It's still very much looking at those fine-tuned details, the very microscopic things, because all of that builds up into lifeways and the people and the culture and who we are. So fortunately, that change was made, and fortunately, I was able to be, changed over, to be urged over into the field of anthropology and archaeology. And so that's basically how I came into the field of archaeology.
Well, thank you. That's really fun to hear. We're just about at our time to wrap up, so I want to give everybody an opportunity to have a final remark or two, and then we'll finish up. So, LaDonna, would you like to have any final thoughts?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm just thankful and grateful to have the opportunity to speak to people, to share Chickasaw culture and our traditions, and to talk about the Southeastern Indians. And so, anytime I have that opportunity, I find it, it's my privilege to do that. So, thank you guys for allowing me to speak today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Stacye?
Again, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I would say that one thing that's really important about archaeology that we haven't touched on is that we did talk about how archaeology tells stories, but in order for sites to tell stories, the sites have to be intact. They have to be in context, because there are things, these microscopic things that LaDonna's talking about. They're the relationship between things tells stories. We call that context, and context of sites are really important. So it's very important, if you find a site, not to dig it up yourself, not to go looking for doodads and artifacts, but to contact a professional archaeologist in your area. You can always contact the Alabama Historical Commission. I'm sure you can contact the archaeologist at Moundville, and allow professionals to and tribes to be involved in the research.
Absolutely. We are interested in that information. And if those sites are disturbed, that information is gone, it's destroyed. We only get one chance to preserve it and protect it. So absolutely. Matt, what about you? Any final thoughts?
So archaeological sites are like books. And we always use the analogy that if you start to take the words out of a book, pretty soon you're not going to be able to read it. And that's exactly what archaeological sites are like. As people destroy parts of the site, digging holes out in them, taking the artifacts away from them, you lose those words, and pretty soon the sites can't tell us the stories that they potentially could.
And
but we also need to be
everybody. So, you're destroying stories that belong to everybody now and in the future.
So from the kid in kindergarten to grandfather that wants to show their grandchildren what they know about archaeology, every one of us is a steward of archaeology and preserving our heritage, our common heritage. And we all have to work together to try to do that. And we all have to work together to try to learn how to interpret these sites. And that's where the relationships that LaDonna's talking about are so incredibly important. It's difficult to learn a foreign language without having somebody teach you what those words mean. And that's how important that relationship is with the tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely. Thanks everybody. It's fun to be back in the fold and talking with everybody. So yeah, thank you. This is a privilege.
Well, I want to thank everybody, Stacye, Brandon, Matt, and LaDonna, for being with us and sharing all your wisdom and knowledge, because I know I learned a lot by listening to you, and I know people out there probably did too. And anybody had any idea about being a person in your field, this might help them get there. Again, I want you to remember this virtual Moundville Native American Festival. We've got a couple more days, in fact, today and tomorrow. And also, don't forget, we do have a website for our gift shop. And I want to show you our new shirt. And if you can see it, and hopefully everybody gets one of these shirts and gets to wear it. And we also have these mugs and quite a few other items in the gift shop. Again, until you come out to Moundville, you really don't know what you're missing. I agree. When you go over that railroad track for the first time, it's unbelievable. As for, like I said earlier, for me, it was other people have to go to other parts of the world to go to their Mecca. This is my Mecca right here. So you guys have a great day. Again, thank you for being with us. And I hope to see you soon. And we are going to have more things going on for the rest of the week. And we will see you then. So you guys have a great day. Yoko Ki.
Yoko King.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.